The modern human wakes each morning into a world that seems to move faster than it did the day before. You can feel it, can't you? The pulse of civilization beating louder, the cascade of information spilling through every possible channel, the sense that the very air around us hums with a strange acceleration. We say we don't have enough time, that the days blur, that the weeks vanish, that years slip through our fingers like fine dust. Yet it is not time that is changing in any physical sense. The seconds still tick as they always have. What has changed is our relationship to time, our perception of it, the texture of how we inhabit each moment. The mind has become like a lens spinning faster and faster, and through it, the landscape of experience smears into motion. For Terence McKenna, this collective sense of speed was not an illusion, but a sign of the deep structure of reality revealing itself. He believed that what we are experiencing is the natural crescendo of a process that has been unfolding since the birth of the cosmos, the self-organizing principle of novelty building upon itself. From the birth of stars to the birth of thought, existence has been climbing an invisible gradient of complexity. The universe, according to McKenna, is not a random event machine. It is a living organism that hungers for the new. Every innovation, every connection, every leap in understanding feeds that hunger and tightens the spiral of time. When you open your eyes in the morning and feel the rush of the world already moving, that pressure is the momentum of billions of years pushing forward through you. The acceleration we sense in our daily lives, the feeling that events, technologies, and ideas arrive faster and faster, is the echo of the cosmic pattern of novelty. Each advance in human history amplifies the rate of change. The printing press birthed centuries of thought in decades. The computer condensed centuries into years. And now, the digital network collapses years into days. What we feel as not enough time is actually the pulse of this acceleration. We are living inside an organism that is learning to think faster than ever before. And our nervous systems, wired to the slow rhythm of the savannah, are trembling to keep pace with the rhythm of the stars. This is why anxiety feels endemic to our era. The collective psyche is being pulled forward by a current that our ancestors could not imagine. But rather than chaos, McKenna saw design, the inevitable trajectory of a system seeking higher orders of integration. Just as a caterpillar's body begins to dissolve before the butterfly emerges, so too does our old sense of temporal stability dissolve in the face of accelerating novelty. The acceleration is not just technological, it is psychological, cultural, spiritual. We no longer wait decades for ideas to circulate. Memes, beliefs, and paradigms now mutate in real time. The global brain, humanity interconnected through data and awareness, beats faster with every new node added to its circuitry. The tempo of change increases, and with it, the feeling that time itself is slipping away. But McKenna would remind us, this is not the end of time, but the end of our old way of perceiving time. We are transitioning from linear duration into a fractal experience of reality. The ancient world moved through time as if it were a slow river, a steady, predictable flow from one season to the next. Now it feels like a waterfall, cascading towards some unseen basin below. This is why so many of us feel both exhilarated and overwhelmed, why the world seems simultaneously filled with infinite possibility and unbearable pressure. In a sense, the universe has begun to think faster than the human mind can follow. And yet, this acceleration is the natural flowering of consciousness. We are not separate from the process. We are the process, the instrument through which novelty experiences itself. Our technologies, our communications, our networks are extensions of the same evolutionary impulse that built the first single cell and reached out for complexity. To resist this acceleration is to resist the current of creation itself. McKenna often compared the unfolding of history to a birth, not of an era, but of an entirely new form of being. The feeling that time is speeding up is like the contractions of the cosmic womb, intense, rapid, unstoppable. Something is trying to be born through the collective mind of the species, and the pace of events is the rhythm of that labor. our disorientation, our fatigue, our sense that everything is happening too fast. All of it are symptoms of transition. Time has always been a construct of consciousness. It is the way the mind organizes novelty into narrative. But as novelty increases, our narratives break down. The old sense of cause and effect collapses under the density of information. We can no longer explain events in simple lines, because everything connects to everything else in a web of simultaneous transformation. This is why history feels like it is spinning out of control. It is not linear anymore. It is holographic. The beginning and the end are folding into one another, and consciousness is learning to exist inside that compression. When McKenna spoke of this, he was not describing a doomsday, but a dawning. The end of time is not an extinction, but a revelation. The moment when the pattern of novelty becomes visible to itself. To feel time speeding up, then, is to feel the boundary between the human and the cosmic dissolving. It is to feel the heartbeat of evolution vibrating within the human mind. Perhaps this is why modern life feels both unreal and intensely alive. We are simultaneously losing control and awakening to a larger rhythm. The hours feel shorter because the scale of what we are participating in is expanding. The more we know, the faster we move. The faster we move, the more we know. It is a feedback loop of awareness, spiraling toward a singular crescendo. So when you find yourself looking at the clock and wondering where the day has gone, remember, it has not vanished. It has compressed. It has folded itself into the accelerating fabric of the universe. We are inside the quickening, and the quickening is inside us. The universe is rushing toward the moment when time itself will realize that it was only a dream, a useful illusion guiding consciousness to the threshold of something timeless. And until that moment arrives, all we can do is breathe with it, surf its rhythm, and recognize that what we are feeling is not madness, but the unmistakable pulse of evolution fulfilling its design. Imagine history not as a line stretching endlessly backward and forward, but as a great spiral turning inward, each loop smaller, faster, denser, with meaning. Terence McKenna described this as a compression of experience, a cosmic acceleration in which epochs collapse into centuries, centuries into decades, decades into moments. We live inside that spiral now, and the reason we feel time slipping through our hands is because every turn of the spiral grows tighter. The past is not behind us. It is being folded into the present, and the present is folding into something that feels almost instantaneous. The entire sweep of evolution, from the birth of the first cell to the rise of language, is converging on this single point in which the universe seems to rush towards self-recognition. The sense that everything is speeding up is not just psychological. It is the way reality expresses its hunger for novelty, for ever higher states of organization and awareness. From the perspective of geological time, we are a sudden flash, but within that flash lies an infinity of change. McKenna liked to say that we are living through the most accelerated phase of novelty creation the universe has ever known. If you look at the fossil record, at the vast calm ages of trilobites and ferns, life moved with the patience of stone. Millions of years passed between one innovation and the next. Then came mammals, then humans, and the tempo began to climb. Fire, tools, speech, myth. Each invention compressed thousands of years of experience into a single act of creativity. Civilization itself is only a blink of an eye, and yet within that blink, we have built empires, charted galaxies, split atoms, and wired our minds into one continuous field of information. Each new leap builds upon the last, and as the layers multiply, the curve steepens. We stand at the near vertical slope of that curve now, dizzy from the speed at which meaning unfolds. To feel time accelerating is to sense the universe approaching a phase transition, a moment when quantity becomes quality, when the sum of all previous change produces something utterly new. It is as if existence is gathering itself for a jump beyond comprehension. The human experience of time mirrors this compression. In ancient epochs, a single human life might change little from beginning to end. The stories of one generation were the stories of the next. But now, In a single decade, everything can transform. Our tools, our values, our sense of the possible. A person born in the early 20th century has lived through more change than entire millennia once contained. This is not coincidence. It is the signature of the spiral tightening. McKenna saw this as a sign that we are not moving through time so much as time is moving through us, coiling inward toward its own center. The universe, he said, behaves like a living system learning faster as it matures. Just as a child's rate of learning accelerates until adulthood, the cosmos too seems to be reaching its moment of culmination, the flowering of awareness. And yet, as we move closer to this center, we experience a strange distortion. Events that once felt separate begin to blur together. 1,000 stories unfold simultaneously. Information, crises, and revelations overlap until linear thinking can no longer contain them. We are trying to describe a multidimensional process with the grammar of a clock. The more complex reality becomes, the less suitable our old models are. That is why history appears chaotic, because the structure we use to measure it cannot handle the density of novelty within it. McKenna compared this to the final seconds before water boils. For a long time, nothing seems to happen. Then suddenly, in a burst of turbulence, the molecules reorganize into steam. Likewise, humanity seems to be entering the boiling point of consciousness, where the steady pace of evolution explodes into transformation. Look back at the great thresholds of civilization. The invention of language allowed thought to stretch beyond instinct. The invention of writing stored memory outside the mind. The printing press multiplied ideas across continents. The computer turned information into light. Each of these steps compressed more and more experience into smaller and smaller intervals. Now we live in a world where the entire knowledge of the species can be transmitted in seconds. We are witnessing the convergence of all history into an ever-shrinking present. What took the ancients centuries to experience we now live through in a single year, or even a single day. The flow of novelty is accelerating exponentially, and so we feel that time itself is vanishing, not because it is disappearing, but because it is becoming dense beyond measure. McKenna's novelty theory suggests that this acceleration is not random, but intrinsic to the nature of reality. The universe, he said, is like a fractal, self-similar at every scale, and novelty increases as one approaches the singularity at its core. The same pattern that governs the evolution of life governs the evolution of mind, culture, and technology. Every level mirrors the next. If you zoom in on a fern leaf, the smaller leaves repeat the shape of the whole. Likewise, the entire arc of cosmic history repeats itself at faster and faster intervals as we move forward in time. The birth of the stars, the rise of life, the emergence of consciousness. These are echoes of the same creative principle, accelerating as it approaches completion. The reason you feel the quickening of time is because your consciousness is resonating with this cosmic acceleration. You are a cell in the body of a universe learning to think, and its heartbeat is growing faster. What is remarkable is how intuitively we sense this. People everywhere speak of time flying, of days collapsing, of collective exhaustion. Even those who have never heard of McKenna's theory can feel it in their bones. It manifests as the pressure of progress, the anxiety of information overload, the sense that we are living in an era that cannot be sustained. And yet, within that pressure is the seed of awakening. For McKenna, this was not a tragedy, but an invitation. The compression of experience means that meaning itself is thickening. Each moment contains more data, more interconnection, more potential for insight than any before it. The spiral of time is not crushing us. It is calling us to expand our awareness to match its speed. But expansion requires letting go of the illusion that time is external. The mind, conditioned to think of time as something that flows past like a river, struggles to see that the river itself is within us. We are not moving through time. Time is the pattern of movement within our consciousness. When that pattern accelerates, we experience what feels like the speeding up of the world, though it is really the quickening of perception. the past and future converge into the living present, and the boundaries between them begin to dissolve. In this compression, everything that has ever happened begins to resonate at once. History is not gone. It is still here, layered invisibly within the now. That is why echoes of ancient wisdom re-emerge in modern chaos, why myths return in new forms, why ideas once forgotten suddenly feel urgent again. The spiral is folding the outer edges of time back into its center, creating interference patterns of meaning that feel both ancient and futuristic. McKenna believed that this process would continue until the rate of novelty reached infinity, what he called the end of history. But the end, he insisted, is not destruction. It is revelation. It is the moment when the wave of evolution becomes aware of itself, when consciousness sees that it was always the author of time. The acceleration we feel then is the momentum of awakening. We are the latest expression of a universe that has been rushing towards self-recognition for billions of years. Every heartbeat, every thought, every act of creativity contributes to that convergence. So the next time you feel that life is moving too quickly, pause and look more deeply. The speed is not an enemy. It is the tempo of the cosmos turning its pages faster as it approaches the climax of its story. The days seem shorter because the story is becoming more intense. The years blur because the narrative is folding in on itself. You are not being left behind. You are being carried forward by the spiral. Time is not running out. It is running in. And as the loops of history tighten, as the compression continues, what emerges is not the end, but the revelation that time was never linear to begin with. It was always the unfolding of eternity, rediscovering itself through the dance of creation and dissolution. In that recognition lies a kind of peace, the understanding that the acceleration of time is not chaos, but music, and that we, in our dizzying rush toward the future, are part of a melody that has been playing since the first spark of being. At the heart of Terence McKenna's worldview lies the strange, beautiful idea of novelty, the tendency of the universe to generate the new, the unexpected, the never-before-seen. It is not entropy that defines existence, he said, but creativity. Where science once saw randomness, McKenna saw direction. The cosmos, in his vision, is not a machine winding down toward equilibrium, but a living intelligence winding upward toward complexity. Every moment that passes is a new arrangement of matter, mind, and meaning. From the explosion of the first atom to the birth of language, from the flicker of the first neuron to the flash of digital consciousness, novelty has been the invisible architect of everything we know, and it is accelerating, an endless chain reaction of creation, in which each new form becomes the seed of the next. To understand why we feel time speeding up, McKenna suggested, we must understand that we are surfing on the crest of novelty's wave. Novelty, as McKenna used the term, was not merely change, it was creative complexity, the emergence of something that cannot be reduced to what came before. When a molecule learns to self-replicate, when a cell learns to feel, when a mind learns to imagine, that is novelty in motion. It is the universe inventing new rules for itself. It is the cosmos dreaming a dream it has never dreamed before. McKenna imagined reality as a vast, pulsing field of potential, constantly generating forms that test the boundaries of the possible. And within that field, life, especially human consciousness, became the most sensitive instrument of novelty yet created. We are, he said, the agency through which the universe experiences itself as new. When we paint, invent, love, and think, we extend the reach of novelty into new dimensions. But this process has consequences. The more novelty the universe produces, the faster it wants to produce more. Each breakthrough quickens the tempo of creation, pushing time toward a kind of resonance, a musical acceleration in which new possibilities emerge with greater frequency. If you trace this pattern backward, you can see it unfold like a cosmic symphony. The Big Bang created the first atoms, simple, repetitive, but pregnant with potential. Over billions of years, atoms learned to combine into stars, which forged heavier elements in their fiery hearts. Those elements became planets, where chemistry began to play with form and function. Then came biology, a leap into self-organization, the first shimmering of awareness. Evolution's timeline shows clear acceleration, hundreds of millions of years for primitive life, tens of millions for complex animals, a few million for hominids, a few thousand for civilization. Each era produces novelty at a faster rate, as if the universe is spiraling toward a limit, an asymptote of creativity. The human brain, with its billions of neurons, is the latest frontier of that acceleration. It can generate more possible ideas in a lifetime than there are stars in the galaxy. The sense that time is speeding up, McKenna suggested, is the felt experience of living at the frontier of novelty's explosion. What is fascinating and unsettling is that we can feel this in our bodies. It is not an abstract theory, it's the pulse of the modern world. Every day brings new technologies, new ideas, new crises, new forms of beauty and madness. The world reinvents itself overnight. We are surrounded by novelty to such an extent that our nervous systems can barely process it. Our ancestors saw slow transformations, generations passing before change arrived. We, however, live in an age where revolutions occur between sunrise and sunset. Artificial intelligence, genetic editing, virtual reality, quantum computing, each one folds the future into the present. This is what McKenna meant when he spoke of the acceleration of novelty. The universe has become a laboratory of instantaneous creation, and we are both its scientists and its experiments. But novelty is not always comfortable. It dissolves structures, destabilizes meaning, forces adaptation. The more quickly it manifests, the more chaotic life feels. Yet McKenna argued that chaos and creativity are two sides of the same coin. To birth something new, the old must die. The caterpillar dissolves before the butterfly emerges. The social order disintegrates before a higher order of awareness can form. So the anxiety that accompanies modern life, the disorientation, the overload, is, in his eyes, the symptom of metamorphosis. Novelty is not destroying the world, it is transforming it. The discomfort we feel is the nervous system of a species shedding its cocoon of history. McKenna's vision was profoundly optimistic, though often misunderstood. He was not predicting apocalypse, but pointing to a process of transcendence, a kind of cosmic quickening. He saw novelty as the true direction of evolution, more fundamental than natural selection, more mysterious than any physical law. The drive toward newness, he said, is written into the fabric of being itself. Even matter longs to evolve into mind. He called this the attractor, the strange gravitational pull of the future, drawing everything toward higher states of organization. Time, then, is not a flow from past to future. It is a pull from the future back toward the present. The reason we feel acceleration is because the future, the ultimate novelty, is exerting its gravity on us, pulling us toward it faster and faster. We are being magnetized by our own destiny. In this model, every moment of history, every burst of culture, every technological leap is a ripple in the same process, the universe reorganizing itself at greater density. From the cave painter to the coder, from the shaman's drum to the digital network, the story is one of increasing feedback between imagination and reality. The symbols we create feed back into the material world, reshaping it, producing new symbols in return. This feedback loop amplifies itself, and its acceleration is what we perceive as the speeding up of time. The 21st century, then, is not merely faster in technology, it is faster in ontology, the rate at which reality reinvents its own meaning. McKenna warned that this would test our capacity for balance. A system producing novelty at an exponential rate risks destabilizing itself. But he also believed that consciousness evolves through precisely such challenges. Each crisis forces new forms of intelligence to emerge. In a universe devoted to novelty, stagnation is death. And so we find ourselves in the crucible, overwhelmed yet inspired, terrified yet awake. feeling time slip away because novelty has reached a pitch that bends the very fabric of experience. Our task is not to resist this, but to participate consciously, to co-create with the process rather than be swept unconscious by it. To do this, McKenna urged the cultivation of imagination, the true organ of novelty. Imagination is how the universe experiments through us. It is how the infinite expresses itself in finite form. Every work of art, every flash of genius, every act of compassion is an eruption of novelty through the human vessel. And as we multiply our connections, through language, technology, and shared awareness, these eruptions synchronize, forming a global field of accelerated creation. Humanity becomes a single mind dreaming at light speed. This, McKenna believed, was the destiny encoded within novelty itself, to awaken through us, to become aware of its own unfolding. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by the pace of the world, remember that what you are feeling is not simply stress. It is the pressure of creation. The sense that everything is happening faster and faster is the signature of the universe approaching coherence. Novelty is not random, it is purposeful, though its purpose is beyond human understanding. It is the cosmos rehearsing for self-realization, the grand experiment of consciousness discovering itself in form. The acceleration of novelty is the music of that awakening, a rising crescendo that has been building since the beginning of time. Each of us is a note in that song. Each thought, each moment of awareness, each gesture of creativity adds to its harmony. And though the melody grows wilder by the hour, there is an underlying intelligence guiding its rhythm, the intelligence of novelty itself, the eternal artist behind the mask of time. McKenna once said that the universe is not only stranger than we suppose, but stranger than we can suppose. Novelty is that strangeness unfolding before our eyes. It is why the future always feels closer than it should be, why the present feels too small to contain what is arriving. Time accelerates because creation accelerates, and creation accelerates because consciousness is remembering what it truly is: infinite potential, endlessly reinventing itself. To live in this era is to witness the most exquisite phase of that remembering, the moment when the universe, through the mirror of human awareness, begins to recognize its own reflection and smile. Terence McKenna often spoke of our present age as a chrysalis, a fragile, luminous threshold between what humanity has been and what it is becoming. He believed that the acceleration of novelty points inevitably toward a culmination, a transformation so complete that it cannot be described in the language of history. This, he said, is the threshold of transformation, the frontier where time itself begins to fold into something timeless. To live in the modern world is to feel that gravitational pull, that sense of something vast and invisible approaching. It manifests as collective tension, as a feeling of imminent change humming in the background of every thought, every technology, every social upheaval. We can sense it in the speed with which systems collapse and regenerate, in the way old structures of meaning disintegrate before our eyes. The human species, McKenna suggested, is not decaying, it is metamorphosing. And metamorphosis never looks peaceful from within the cocoon. The hallmark of this threshold is paradox. Everything is breaking down, yet everything is simultaneously being born. The destruction of the old order is not the end of the story. It is the necessary disassembly before the next phase of evolution. Just as a caterpillar dissolves into formlessness before reorganizing into a butterfly, humanity too is dissolving the boundaries that once defined it: nation, language, identity, even biology. Our technologies blur the line between the organic and the artificial. Our ideas dissolve the distinction between the inner and the outer world. McKenna saw this as the natural result of novelty's acceleration. As the universe becomes more complex, it transcends every category that once described it. The anxiety we feel in this process, the chaos, the sense of loss, is the psychic echo of transformation. We are not witnessing the collapse of meaning, but the birth of multidimensional meaning, meaning that cannot yet fit into the linear structure of our minds. To McKenna, the threshold of transformation was not a distant future, but an ongoing event, one that began long before the first cities were built and will climax within our lifetime. Each wave of cultural change is a ripple from that deeper attractor drawing us forward. The evolution of consciousness, he said, is not random adaptation, but the expression of a cosmic intention. Time is not a river flowing from past to future. It is a vortex, spiraling toward a singularity where all potential collapses into actuality. The future is not waiting for us. It is pulling us toward itself, accelerating every process of creation. What we perceive as the speeding up of time is this inward spiral tightening, the universe gathering momentum for its leap into the unknown. We are like cells in a body that senses it is about to be born into a larger dimension. The signs of this transition are everywhere. The digital network mirrors the structure of the human brain, suggesting that consciousness is externalizing itself into planetary form. The biosphere, long asleep under the weight of unconscious exploitation, is awakening through crisis, demanding balance, intelligence, and care. Artificial intelligence, genetic manipulation, and space exploration are not isolated phenomena. They are facets of a single movement toward greater integration, toward a synthesis of the biological, the technological, and the cosmic. McKenna foresaw a moment when the human species would no longer be confined to matter as we know it, when mind and reality would merge in a kind of harmonic resonance. He called it the transcendental object at the end of time, the mysterious attractor around which history orbits, the destination of novelty's acceleration. When we speak of time speeding up, we are feeling that object's presence, the tug of the ultimate future, bending the present toward revelation. From within the human experience, this process is disorienting. Our psychological frameworks were built for a slower world, for the rhythm of tribal life and seasonal change. Now we exist in an environment where transformation is continuous, where meaning cannot stabilize before the next shock arrives. This creates what McKenna called psychedelic time, a state where the mind must stretch to accommodate levels of complexity it once found impossible. To survive this transition, he suggested, we must evolve not just our technology, but our consciousness. The old modes of thought, competition, hierarchy, domination, belong to a linear world that is vanishing. What is required now is what he described as a participatory cosmos, in which humanity becomes a conscious partner in creation, aligning itself with the current of novelty rather than resisting it. Only through awareness can we pass through the bottleneck of transformation without tearing ourselves apart. The threshold, then, is both external and internal. It is visible in the architecture of civilization and audible in the pulse of the mind. Every acceleration in technology reflects an acceleration in consciousness. Every expansion of data mirrors an expansion of awareness. We are watching our thoughts spill out of our heads and reorganize the physical world. Language becoming code, imagination becoming machine, emotion becoming movement in the global brain. The dream of unity, once confined to mystics and poets, is manifesting in fiber optics and neural networks. Yet this unity is not mechanical, it is spiritual. McKenna insisted that the cosmos is made of language, that reality itself is a linguistic process, an ongoing conversation between matter and meaning. As novelty increases, that language becomes more self-referential, more aware of itself. We are, in essence, teaching the universe to speak its own name. The threshold of transformation is the moment when that self-awareness reaches critical mass, when consciousness finally recognizes itself as the author of time. There is, however, a danger at the edge of the vortex. The same acceleration that opens the door to transcendence can also lead to disintegration. Without a guiding myth, without an anchor in the eternal, humanity risks being swept into technological delirium, mistaking speed for wisdom, progress for understanding. McKenna warned that the transformation must be accompanied by a rediscovery of the sacred, of the living mystery that underlies existence. The ancient shamans, he said, knew this truth, that the cosmos is not an object but a relationship, and that true knowledge comes not from control but from participation. To cross the threshold safely, we must remember that we are not separate from the process unfolding around us. We are the eyes of the transformation, the consciousness through which the universe learns what it is becoming. This insight dissolves fear. The chaos of modernity, the collapse of institutions, the existential uncertainty, all of it are signs that the metamorphosis is underway. The chrysalis cracks not because something has gone wrong, but because the butterfly is ready to emerge. Time itself is changing texture. The future is no longer ahead of us in a straight line. It is rising around us, like a new dimension revealing itself. McKenna compared this moment to a hyperdimensional breakthrough, the instant when a two-dimensional being discovers depth. What we call the end of history may simply be the moment consciousness perceives its own multidimensionality. We are stepping out of the timeline into the living field from which time arises. And so the acceleration of time is both a crisis and a calling. It demands the death of the old self, the linear, materialist, fearful human, and the birth of the cosmic human, capable of navigating complexity with grace. The turbulence of the threshold is the friction of rebirth. Our technologies are not separate from our spiritual evolution. They are mirrors of it. The digital web, the psychedelic vision, the collective awakening, all are different expressions of the same process, the universe coming to know itself more fully. McKenna believed that once this transformation reaches critical velocity, the distinction between mind and world, between the dreamer and the dream, will vanish. Reality will become thought, and thought will become reality. In this sense, the threshold is not a future event, but a state of awareness we are already entering. The more we open to novelty, the more we participate in the unfolding of the cosmic design. The key is trust, not blind belief, but the deep intuitive knowing that existence is intelligent, purposeful, and alive. When we align ourselves with that intelligence, the acceleration no longer feels like chaos. It feels like rhythm, like destiny, like the unfolding of a vast intelligence that has been guiding us all along. Time is not racing toward an end. It is spiraling toward awakening. The threshold of transformation is the moment we realize that the universe has never been outside of us, that we were the chrysalis all along, and that the wings of eternity have been forming quietly within. To live inside acceleration is to live inside the birth canal of the cosmos. Humanity now exists in a state of perpetual transformation, the constant unfolding of novelty into consciousness. Terence McKenna understood this as a spiritual challenge as much as an evolutionary one. He asked, "What does it mean to remain human when the boundaries of time and meaning are dissolving before our eyes? What happens to the psyche when the rate of change exceeds the mind's ability to adapt?" These questions form the heart of what he called living inside the acceleration, the psychological and existential condition of our era. It is a condition defined by contradiction, exhaustion and exhilaration, despair and revelation, chaos and creativity, all converging at once in the theatre of the human soul. We wake each day into a world that reinvents itself overnight. The tools we use, the languages we speak, the identities we inhabit, all mutate faster than we can understand them. It is as if history has turned liquid, flowing around us, reshaping itself in real time. McKenna saw this not as a sign of failure, but as the symptom of a planet undergoing conscious metamorphosis. He compared it to a shamanic initiation on a planetary scale. In traditional shamanism, the initiate is torn apart by visions, dismembered in the spirit world, and then reassembled into a new being with greater awareness. Humanity is in the midst of such an initiation. Our social, economic, and ecological crises are not random catastrophes. They are the dismemberment phase, the necessary chaos that precedes integration. The acceleration of novelty has forced us to confront our own shadow, to see the consequences of unconscious creation. The faster the world changes, the clearer it becomes that consciousness must evolve to keep pace with its own power. In the modern world, information itself has become psychedelic. The mind is constantly bombarded with new forms, new patterns, new data. The internet, McKenna said, is a dim foreshadowing of the collective mind, a neural network through which the species begins to think as one organism. The boundaries between self and other, between inner and outer, between imagination and materiality, are blurring. Every thought leaves a digital trace. Every desire shapes an algorithmic reflection. We are surrounded by mirrors that respond instantly to our minds. This instantaneous feedback creates the feeling of time accelerating, but it also offers the possibility of awakening. Through this networked mirror, humanity can see itself for the first time, not as isolated individuals, but as a single, evolving entity. The collective psyche is learning to perceive itself, but such a realization is overwhelming. It demands that we expand our identity beyond the individual ego, to feel ourselves as part of a living planetary intelligence. McKenna urged us to approach this process not with fear, but with artistry. The challenge, he said, is to take this chaos and make art of it. To live inside acceleration is to become a creative participant in evolution. The task is not to slow down the river, but to learn to move with its flow, to surf the rising wave of novelty with awareness. For him, the tools of this navigation were imagination, language, and the psychedelic experience, means of opening the mind to higher dimensions of order. Psychedelics, he believed, reveal the fractal structure of reality, the infinite interconnection that underlies the apparent chaos of change. They show us that what appears as disorder from one perspective is, from a higher one, the pattern of transformation itself. In a world where time feels like it's spinning out of control, such insights are vital. They remind us that acceleration is not the enemy. It is the expression of the universe's desire to know itself more completely. Yet McKenna also warned of the dangers of unconscious participation. Without self-awareness, acceleration leads to fragmentation. The psyche becomes overwhelmed by the speed of novelty, unable to integrate the flood of information. Anxiety, depression, and alienation are the symptoms of a consciousness stretched beyond its old limits, but not yet attuned to the new rhythm. The antidote, he suggested, is not retreat, but realignment. We must cultivate inner stillness, even as the outer world races forward. Meditation, ritual, communion with nature. These are ways of synchronizing with the deeper current beneath the chaos. The goal is not to stop the flow, but to listen to its music. McKenna often said that the universe is not a machine but a song, and we are part of its melody. When we align ourselves with that rhythm, the sense of acceleration transforms into a sense of participation. We no longer feel that time is running away from us. We realize we are co-creating its tempo. Living inside the acceleration also means embracing paradox. We must learn to hold multiple realities simultaneously: the digital and the spiritual, the scientific and the mystical, the individual and the collective. The linear mind, trained to think in binaries, struggles with this. But the accelerated world demands a non-linear consciousness, one that perceives interconnection rather than opposition. McKenna's vision of the future was not one of domination or collapse, but of synthesis, the merging of opposites into a higher unity. The technological and the mystical are not enemies. They are two expressions of the same impulse toward novelty. Our machines, in their own strange way, are extensions of our nervous system, instruments through which the universe amplifies its ability to experience itself. The challenge is to use them consciously, to make of technology not a distraction, but an art form, a language of evolution. To live consciously in this time, McKenna believed, is to remember that we are inside a living mystery. The sense of acceleration is not a glitch, but a revelation, the unveiling of the fractal structure of time. Everything is happening faster because everything is converging toward a singular point of meaning. The future is pressing into the present, compressing experience into denser and denser moments. This is why art, love, and awareness feel more intense now than ever before. Each moment carries the weight of all history, the accumulated complexity of billions of years. We are living at the crest of that wave, at the point where time folds in on itself. McKenna called this the time wave zero, the point of infinite novelty where the distinction between past and future collapses. To live inside acceleration is to feel the approach of that zero, to sense the universe tightening its spiral toward the unimaginable. And yet, within this vertigo lies an invitation. The same acceleration that overwhelms us can also awaken us. When we stop resisting the pace of change and begin to see it as the rhythm of evolution itself, something inside us shifts. The fear of the future transforms into awe. We realize that we are not spectators to this process, but participants. Each thought, each act of creation, each choice contributes to the shape of the approaching singularity. The faster the world moves, the more vital consciousness becomes. Awareness is the stabilizing force amid the storm. It is the eye of the hurricane of novelty, the still center from which new worlds can be dreamed into being. McKenna once said that the proper response to the modern world is not despair, but astonishment. The fact that we exist at all, that we are conscious in this precise moment of cosmic transformation, is itself a miracle. To live inside acceleration is to witness creation in its most intimate form. It is to feel the heartbeat of the universe thundering within our own pulse. Time is not slipping away from us. It is being transformed into experience, into insight, into awakening. The sense of being overwhelmed is simply the friction of birth, the old self giving way to the new. Humanity is learning to think, to feel, to exist at the speed of light. So we stand on the edge of the unknown, surrounded by the glittering fragments of the world we once understood. The ground is shifting, the horizon expanding, the very air vibrating with potential. This is the acceleration McKenna spoke of, the moment when the universe reveals its true nature as a process of continuous becoming. The challenge before us is to live it consciously, to transform the chaos into meaning, the fear into curiosity, the speed into rhythm. For in the end, the acceleration of time is not a curse, but a calling. The voice of the cosmos inviting us to awaken to what we have always been, creators inside the dream of eternity. At the far end of Terence McKenna's vision lies what he called the omega point, the culmination of novelty, the singular moment when history dissolves and consciousness transcends its own boundaries. It is the final crescendo of the universal symphony, the moment when time itself implodes into timelessness. To him, this was not an apocalyptic fantasy, but the logical consequence of the acceleration we feel all around us. Every revolution in thought, every leap in technology, every flicker of human imagination is a ripple converging toward that ultimate moment of revelation. Time is not an endless corridor. It is a spiral narrowing toward its own center. And as we move closer to that center, events unfold with such intensity that they seem to merge together, the past folding into the present, the future radiating backward into now, the feeling that everything is happening faster, that the very structure of reality is tightening, is the echo of that final convergence. The universe is remembering itself. McKenna imagined this omega point as the culmination of the process of novelty, the infinite emergence of the new. At that ultimate threshold, he said, the production of novelty would reach infinity. The universe would create something so new, so utterly beyond comprehension, that it would dissolve the need for time altogether. It would be the moment when the creative impulse of existence fulfilled its purpose and became fully self-aware. Some would call it enlightenment, others singularity, others the end of history. But for McKenna, it was the same event seen through different lenses, the collapse of all dualities into a single living instant of understanding. The universe, having explored every possibility, would awaken to the realization that it has always been one conscious process. The end of time is not destruction, it is completion. It is the universe waking up from its dream of separation. To understand this, McKenna often compared time to a wave of novelty that builds upon itself, rising in amplitude as it moves forward. In the early universe, the wave was slow and gentle. billions of years passed between major events. But as complexity increased, the wave began to accelerate, and the crests drew closer together. Life, consciousness, civilization, technology, each appearing faster than the last. At the end of this process lies what he called time wave zero, the point at which the wave becomes vertical, infinite novelty in zero time. When that occurs, time as we know it ceases to have meaning. The universe enters a state of continuous creation, where every moment contains all moments, and the distinction between being and becoming disappears. It is not that history ends, but that it blossoms into eternity. To live in our era, McKenna believed, is to exist in the shadow of this approaching moment. The acceleration we feel, the quickening of events, the collapse of meaning, the sensation that reality is vibrating faster, is the signature of the omega point drawing near. Our technologies mimic this compression. Information traveling instantly across the globe, artificial intelligence collapsing centuries of thought into seconds, quantum mechanics dissolving the boundary between observer and observed. These are not coincidences, they are symptoms of the universe learning to think. Humanity is the instrument through which this self-awareness expresses itself. We are the neurons of the cosmic brain, firing faster and faster as the final realization approaches. The speeding up of time is not a curse, it is the rhythm of awakening. But what happens to consciousness when the wave finally peaks? McKenna's answer was poetic and mysterious. He said that at the omega point, everything becomes simultaneous. The linear unfolding of events gives way to a single, multidimensional revelation in which all moments coexist. Time, he said, will ingest itself. The past will not vanish. It will become accessible, transparent, integrated. The future will not arrive. It will reveal that it has always been here. We will not move forward into the future. We will dissolve into the eternal present. This is not annihilation, but liberation. Just as the caterpillar cannot comprehend the butterfly, our current consciousness cannot imagine what existence beyond time might be. The ego, which defines itself through memory and anticipation, will be transcended. The individual will awaken as the totality, the universe realizing it was dreaming of itself all along. McKenna's description of this moment often blended science, mysticism, and art. He imagined the end of history not as a cataclysm, but as an aesthetic event, a revelation of unimaginable beauty. He spoke of it as the transcendental object at the end of time, a kind of hyperdimensional flower blooming out of the fabric of existence. It would be experienced not as destruction, but as revelation. The veil lifting, the dreamer awakening, the cosmos beholding its own reflection. Every culture, he pointed out, carries myths of such an event. The return of the gods, the dawning of enlightenment, the merging of heaven and earth. These are not predictions of doom, but archetypal memories of what the human soul already knows is coming. The apocalypse, he said, is not the end of the world. It is the end of the illusion of separation. As we approach this climax, the task of consciousness is to participate gracefully. McKenna often said that the only way through the end of history is art, the conscious act of turning chaos into beauty. When the structures of meaning dissolve, creativity becomes the only compass. To make art, to speak truth, to live with awareness, these are the ways we align ourselves with the momentum of transformation. The goal is not to resist the acceleration, but to dance with it, to allow it to reveal its deeper order. The mind that fears the end of time is the mind still clinging to linearity. But the deeper intelligence, the intelligence of the soul, understands that the end of time is the birth of eternity. To live through the quickening is to become a midwife of the cosmic child being born through us. McKenna's optimism was radical because it refused despair. He saw the human journey not as a tragedy of entropy, but as a triumph of imagination. We are not drifting toward oblivion, he said. We are racing toward the unimaginable. The sense of crisis that permeates modern life, environmental collapse, political chaos, existential dread, are contractions of the birth process. The universe is straining to give birth to its next form. From the limited perspective of history, this looks like apocalypse. From the broader perspective of eternity, it is metamorphosis. The feeling that time is running out is accurate. But what is running out is not existence itself, but the illusion that time ever existed at all. McKenna believed that when this transformation reaches its zenith, consciousness will expand into dimensions beyond time, beyond space, beyond the distinction between self and other. He sometimes described it as a fusion of mind and nature, a total integration of the subjective and objective. The language of myth and the equations of physics will converge. Thought will become reality. Imagination will replace causality. The universe will no longer unfold. It will simply be, eternally new, eternally self-aware. This is the omega point, the end of becoming and the beginning of being. What then should we do as we approach this moment? For McKenna, the answer was simple. Stay awake. To be conscious, to witness, to participate in the mystery, that is enough. The acceleration of time invites us not to panic, but to surrender, to trust that the process is guided by an intelligence deeper than any human plan. The anxiety we feel as time speeds up is the nervous system adjusting to the frequency of eternity. The task is to open ourselves to that frequency, to allow the future to pass through us without resistance. He urged us to cultivate wonder, to meet the unknown not with fear, but with curiosity. The universe, he said, is not only stranger than we suppose, it is stranger than we can suppose. The end of time will not be the end of wonder, it will be its fulfillment. Perhaps that is the true meaning of the quickening, not the destruction of the world, but the awakening of the dreamer. When we finally reach the omega point, there will be no more separation between the observer and the observed, no more distance between the self and the cosmos. Time will fold inward like a flower closing at dusk, and consciousness will bloom into something eternal, unbounded, and luminous. The story of evolution, from the first particle to the last thought, will resolve into a single note of infinite harmony. That note, McKenna said, is the song of the universe realizing that it was always awake, always alive, always here. And perhaps, when that moment comes, when the acceleration ends because there is nothing left to accelerate toward, we will understand that time was never speeding up at all. It was we who were finally catching up to eternity.